Hello and welcome to Sharing the Light and I'm Reverend Robert Griffin. Sharing the Light is an online ministry opportunity of the Sunshine Cathedral located here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Hello and welcome to Sharing the Light. I'm Reverend Robert Griffin. Today with me on Sharing the Light is Reverend Durrell Watkins, who of course is our senior pastor here at the Sunshine Cathedral. And we're also honored to be joined today by the Reverend Dr. Mona West. Dr. West is the director of the Office of Formation and Leadership Development for the Metropolitan Community Churches and is also a consultant for us here at the Sunshine Cathedral in the area of spiritual practices. Dr. West is also a noted scholar and author in the Hebrew Scriptures and is one of the contributing editors to the recently published Queer Bible Commentary. So welcome to you both today. And our topic for this segment today, we're going to be addressing the question or the thought of the queer Bible study. So Pastor, if you would set the context for us today as to why that particular issue is important for us to talk about.
Well, it seems like we've had different waves of Bible study in MCC and in the sort of gay Christianity. And the first was sort of defanging the clobber passages. You know, there's about 6 passages that have been used sort of abusively, and so we needed to deconstruct those and put those in a historical context and deal with the linguistics and just, sort of defang that. And then a lot of people, that was very defensive, and a lot of people were just sort of happy to end there. But then others of us thought, well, okay, if our previous churches got it wrong about this one thing, what is the probability that's the only thing they got wrong? So we decided maybe that there should be a critical approach to Bible study, period, throughout the Bible. So then we, rather than just being defensive, saying, well, this has been used in a certain way, but maybe there's another way to look at it, and that doesn't justify condemning us. So then we started playing sort of where's Queer Waldo, trying to find where gay and lesbian, same gender loving, or gender transgressive people might be in the scriptures. And so that was fun. But eventually, I think that doesn't totally satisfy either. It's like, okay, yay, just like there are people like me in Broward County, there are people like me in the Bible. Okay, who cares? So I'm wondering if there is a next wave, another wave of having a queer lens that makes the Bible relevant, where I see myself in the scriptures, but where it's more than just justifying me or repelling opponents. If there's something about queer theology, a queer lens, a queer experience, a queer critique that is useful for my overall spirituality, and that just like black theology is helpful to anyone, and feminist theology is helpful to anyone, and womanist theology, and liberation theology, and heuristic theology. I'm wondering if queer theology is a discipline that could be useful for Bible study, period, and if so, how? And I think we have the expert who maybe can share some light on that for us. That would be you.
Oh, you mean? All right, okay. Well, thanks, Durrell, for that overview, and I think you're right. We have seen a shift that has happened, at least for the way LGBTQ, queer people, read the Bible, from that defensive stance to a more offensive stance. And what has happened in the larger world of biblical studies in general is that there has been more of a focus on the reader, that readers bring particular selves to a text and make particular meaning of a text based on their experience. And so what then might queer readers do when they come to a biblical text? And so what has happened is that we have moved outside of just looking at those stories of Jonathan and David, Ruth and Naomi, which certainly that's important to do, but to read the whole Bible intentionally as LGBT people of faith. And that's a very empowering approach to Scripture, because now we find ourselves in the story, but we can trust the Bible for our spiritual formation. I think these previous approaches to Scripture, we've been reading the Bible for information, and that's important. But now with this shift toward readers, this shift toward being unapologetic about being a queer reader of the Bible, I believe empowers us to trust the formative nature of Scripture that allows Scripture then to help us in our own spiritual formation. And I think that's the shift that we're seeing with queer Bible study, with queer biblical hermeneutics. And just to say a word about that word, queer,
Please.
a lot of folks, even in our community, don't like the word, but what we're trying to do is to take back that word, because there is power in naming ourselves. Other people have named us in not so nice ways, and so to take back the word queer, it's the same thing that happened in the African American community when the word black was taken back, and so to claim that word in a very powerful way. To queer something is to query it, to ask questions of it, but also to queer something is to resist previous ways of reading Scripture that has been harmful to us. And so when we say we're queering the Scriptures, we are resisting, we're questioning, we're querying those old ways, those harmful ways, in order to make way for a new way that's subversive sometimes, that's playful sometimes, that's campy sometimes. Right. And that's a very empowering word then, at least for me. And so I would just invite anyone who has a little difficulty with that word to sort of try it on, and maybe instead of thinking of it as a noun, think of it more as a verb, to queer something. And I think Jesus certainly was queer. I mean, he was subversive. He didn't fit the status quo. He was questioning. And so...
it seems like a very queer act for I mean, this is the narrative, whether this happens just this way or not, but in the narrative, when Jesus reaches over and takes Elijah's cup at the Last Supper, he sort of spoils the tradition. He turns the tradition on its head just all at once. When he takes Elijah's cup and reinterprets it and presents it in a new way, or even the stories about him where, well, yeah, you killed our guy, but he didn't stay dead. Well, that's sort of a queer story, because mostly dead people stay dead. And here's someone, who we're saying that this, that your horrible act didn't take. And so, I mean, the queer lens sort of becomes the way that I see almost everything anymore. The story of Leah and Rachel, I identify so much with Leah through a queer lens. That she's sort of left out, I think, in lots of ways. And even though she's an important part of the story, but she's sort of left out, and she has to even negotiate for her space in her own family, and that seems familiar to me.
Would you both agree that one of the steps that a person probably first must do is actually pick up the Bible and read it for themselves and engage it? What would you say to that about the first step to get into the queer Bible study? What's the first step?
Well, I think the first step would be that don't be afraid of the Bible. The Bible is, it's not a fourth member of the Trinity.
Right.
A lot of people want to kind of elevate the Bible as like God. I mean, it is a divine human book. So don't be afraid, to take it up and to read it for yourselves, and get a good translation. I think the New Revised Standard Version is a very good English translation of the Bible that's in the King James tradition. So you're not, betraying the King James. It is a revision of the King James, and it is based on the most reliable manuscripts that we have in the Hebrew and the Greek. So get a good translation. Don't be afraid to pick it up and to read it for yourself. You have just as much right to read and interpret and make sense of these stories in Scripture as I do, as a PhD in Hebrew Bible. So you are an interpreter and a valid one, and your experience also equips you, because readers make sense of texts, and you're a reader. So take and read. What is it that St. Augustine, I think, or St. Augustine actually, I heard that voice, take and read. Take and read. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us here today, and thank you for being with us on Sharing the Light. Thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, please visit us on our website at www.sunshinecathedral.org, or write to me with your questions and comments at robert@sunshinecathedral.org. And now for our final word from our senior minister, Reverend Durrell Watkins.
We're so glad you were with us today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Sharing the Light. If you're ever in the Fort Lauderdale area, we hope you'll worship with us at 1480 Southwest 9th Avenue. Our services are at 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. and 6 p.m. on Sundays. Of course, you can always watch all of our programming and read our literature on the website. You can make prayer requests or donations on the website as well. In any case, we wish you blessings on your journey.
Thank you for joining us here on Sharing the Light.